Welcome to Guardians of the Data. I'm your host, Ward Balzerzak. Each episode will explore the passions, expertise, and real world experiences of security leaders who are helping the future of data security and governance. Guardians of the Data is made possible by support from Centra. To learn more about our AI powered data security platform, please visit centra.io. Let's dive in. Welcome back to another episode of Guardians of the Data. My guest today is a leader with more than 25 years of experience in cybersecurity. He's won multiple industry awards, including Top Global CISO in 2025 at Cyber Defense Conference. Currently the Vice President and CISO at EnPro, Frank DePaola. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Really excited that we're finally getting this episode recorded, Frank. Are you ready?
I am ready.
Awesome. In your professional opinion, what's the biggest challenge organizations are facing when it comes to data security?
That's a good question. Definitely in today's climate, it's a worthy question. I think the biggest challenge is the fact that over the most recent years, a lot of organizations are finally starting to realize the value of the data within their environments. A lot of organizations are embracing that mantra of, data is the new currency of business. And as businesses start to realize that more and more, they want more and more of the data. And the more you accumulate of something, the harder it is to kind of manage. In addition, we layer on, it would be amiss if I didn't at least, throw out the acronym of AI. Everybody wants to do something with AI. And, if you haven't heard it, hopefully I'm not telling it to you first, but the state of your data will have a direct impact on the success of your AI initiatives. And so when we start to look at all of these things from a security lens, managing data becomes a lot more important, a lot more timely, and a lot more complex. I also think that traditionally, a lot of security folks used to think about securing data as more of a static thing, right? We secured data where it lived. So if we had a data platform, a data lake, et cetera, we were securing that environment and all of the data within. Well, there could be lots of different types of data that needs to be protected, very differently within that one singular platform. So in addition, as I mentioned, organizations are using data differently. Well, we're also exchanging data very differently. So this new mantra of not securing data where it lives, or a more ambiguous way of data security, but thinking about how we secure data in motion or where data is flowing and how we can do that and the technologies that we might seek to leverage to successfully achieve that become pretty challenging for us. So, it's kind of a complex answer, but it's multifaceted for sure.
There was a lot in there, and one piece I wanted to pick on first is actually where you started, right? Data's growing and growing. I mean, I remember, 2 decades when I kind of really got into data security myself 2 decades ago, we were measuring in gigs, right? Oh, we got X amount of, 500 gig, holy cow. And then all of a sudden it broke into terabytes, 1 terabyte, multiple terabytes, holy cow. And now when I talk to organizations, we're talking about petabytes of data, right? Just this mountain, and that's petabytes in this place, petabytes in that place. And curious on your own experience here, how are you dealing with, or how do you recommend folks deal with just this accumulation, ever growing amount of data for an organization?
Yeah, well, that accumulation of data creates some additional challenges and considerations that organizations need to make. The one thing that I tell largely our legal team is, and they agree with me, but just because we have the data doesn't mean we should have the data or need the data. And so when organizations find themselves accumulating just kind of unsurmountable amounts of data, I think they really need to take a hard look at, what is the data that's critical to the business, and what data should they be offloading in some way, shape, or form. And that largely comes in the way of like your data retention programs and the processes that you collectively agree to with the business in order to kind of streamline and skinny your data sets down into manageable sizes. The other thing about keeping so much data is sometimes that can actually create different types of risks to organizations too. So um, you know it and also, I mean, the hardest part about that though is when users become accustomed to having, decades worth of historical data, well, they tend to kind of lean on that as a crutch. And once again, it can create bad habits for organizations, technical deaded processes that they embrace, and it can also sometimes create challenges for organizations to be able to modernize effectively.
Totally agree. I mean, I've had a few conversations lately, actually, with organizations where we talk about this idea of data sprawl and just the ever-growing amount, like we were just talking about. And I would ask, "What are you doing with your data retention policy?" And either I get a laugh, right? They don't have one, which is kind of scary here in 2026, or maybe they do, but it's not being followed. Or I think the third, piece I've seen is they do, but they didn't really work with the business, right? They kind of just looked at it and said, 7 years, right? And called it a day instead of going and talking to that group and saying, how long do you need your data? Do you have any regulatory requirements around it? Um, your thoughts, how should folks, if they don't have one, which again, 2026, hopefully they do. If they don't have one or it's not good, do you have any tips or tricks for kind of building out a decent data retention policy?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that I think I'm very proud of in the industry that I work is we have a great community that's always willing to share and in CISOs or security leadership circles, if you're seeking to do something, there's a high likelihood that somebody in a similar industry or similar kind of business composition has probably done it and has the bruises and scars to prove it, and they would always be willing to kind of share their wisdom, their experiences with you. So that would be the first thing is find a thought partner. Don't be afraid to reach out through different social media circles like LinkedIn to see if somebody might be willing to share some advice. In addition, if you haven't built a program, data retention program, you know, um, uh, it probably goes without saying, but these things can be pretty complex. When we think about different data silos, I think the word silo really sums it up. Like there's a lot of different areas where data exists that may have differing requirements. And so this is one area where hiring a third party, a consulting firm, that there's some really good ones out there that specialize in helping organizations not, with the technology to execute managing the data retention processes, but really help you to, create policy, help you with the organizational change management, and help you really understand what should you be doing with different types of data. An example I'll give is, largely email retention can look a little bit different than general, like, unstructured data retention, your file servers, for example. You also mentioned regulatory compliance requirements. The company I work for is publicly traded. So, we also support, U.S. Department of Defense programs. And when you start looking at the complexities and the regulatory compliance requirements that are layered, it can get really complex. And if somebody who's never done it before tries to just embark on this journey, it can almost be so daunting that it kind of scares you to pause before you even start to get started. You may not know how to get started. And once again, that's where I go back, find somebody who's done it before, whether it's an industry peer, a consulting company, but let them come in and help you figure out, how to crawl into the walk, into the run phases of building out a data retention program.
Really good tips. And I think you could probably rinse and reuse that across most things, right? In cybersecurity, like why reinvent the wheel? Because a lot of the issues, at least my opinion here, a lot of the issues we deal with including the new technologies. It all goes back to the fundamentals at the end of the day. Like if you're not doing the fundamentals, you're not doing them well. Yeah, you're probably going to struggle, and you're probably going to have some risk exposed with those new things. Um, awesome, really good advice for those items there. Kind of the second piece of your answer was almost taking I'll call it a transformative approach, right? You mentioned a lot of organizations are looking to secure where it resided, right? Kind of the legacy approach. Still valid, I would say, right? It's still valid to try to secure it where it is, but I like kind of how you said it. We need to transition to securing it in motion, as it's moving somewhere or being used or whatever. So expand upon that for us. What are your thoughts and what should folks be doing?
Yeah, so it's a good question. So I think it's also an evolve. The answer is really evolving. This mindset of securing data in motion is really, something that I think a lot of the vendor industry is starting to focus on too. Some of the challenges that are introduced into that idea is the fact that nowadays we talked all call about the fact that the data is growing within our organizations, and also is the way that we use data. And so when we think about securing data in motion within our own environments, that's probably a little bit easier to accomplish because we have direct control, visibility, observability, et cetera, of our data. And we can apply different types of technical controls as well as administrative controls, and we can measure and audit the effectiveness and the adherence of those controls. But where that starts to kind of break down a little bit and become a little challenging is in all the areas where data leaves our physical purview. And so some examples like in manufacturing, we often hire subcontractors to manufacture certain components for us in the manufacturing of something we're building for a upstream customer. And as a result of that, we have to take the data that might have been shared, specs, design drawings, we have to share that with our subcontractor. Now we have administrative controls that allow some legal obligations, some protection, indemnification of for ourselves, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we're still kind of securing the data to the same effectiveness as when it's within our physical and direct control. And so it's in those environments. Another example is the emergence. I mean, everybody is using cloud and SaaS services today. And so as we think about the fact that a lot of times this shared responsibility model, well, we may be using a managed service in AWS or Azure. And through that managed service, once again, we don't have direct control of the data. And so we have to figure out novel ways that we can, protect the data with the same efficacy as we can when it's, within the boundaries of our environment. And I think this is kind of the innovation path for a lot of vendors, is to figure out, one is to understand that data is the currency of business and is the crown jewel of today and tomorrow, but also to figure out how can we secure life cycles and provide the same level of control, security, and really comfort for the data owners when that data leaves our site and our environments. And that's a challenge.
I heard a lot of good nuggets in there. And it's kind of funny because when I talk to some security leaders around like data in motion security, everybody automatically assumes or thinks about data loss prevention, right? DLP has been around for a very long time. DLP often has a lot of negative connotations with it because it's generally pretty business impactful. There's not a lot of organizations that have been super successful putting in DLP controls. I don't think you were talking about DLP though in a lot of what you said. Like I think there were some aspects maybe that DLP solutions can cover, but I heard other types of things. So let's kind of go to the enterprise controls, the inside the walls. Because again, I think a lot of security leaders, maybe rightfully so, at least first focus on the perimeter, right? Let's make sure we know what's leaving. But I've seen a lot of organizations either accept the risk, you know what, we don't care how data moves internally, or just don't know how to do anything about the internal. So, do you have any thoughts on what organizations might be able to do to obtain that observability within the enterprise?
Yes. I think, so you mentioned like DLP and, and I may piss off a lot of vendors, but, I obviously like, I think a lot of people would agree that the DLP market has been needing innovation for a long, long time. And with this new, well, not new, but with this growing trend towards, data, the importance of data and data, being even further elevated as the crown jewel of, well, nearly every business. Um, I think I'm seeing a resurgence in innovation in the DLP space. And when I think about that, I think further driving that is one is, you have the DLP market, then you have like the DSPM or data security posture management market, and DSPM being, a little different than DLP and its objectives. And then you have this emergence of AI governance. And I generally tend to kind of lump AI governance and all of that into the protection of data, because at the end of the day, the value of AI, especially like generative AI, is really the information. And so when I think about that, I've been looking for a lot of vendors who are understanding that you shouldn't have a different DLP platform from DSPM platform. Like, these things should be meshed and should play well together, in my opinion. So, in my organization, that's the approach that we took, is not to look for a bunch of point solutions that do very similar and slightly overlapping, but also some different capabilities, but look for a more comprehensive platform that allows us to more effectively manage, complete data life cycles. So identifying where we have risky behaviors, understanding how we should manage data life cycles, managing the retention, being able to determine where data originated from, being able to mark and label our data. Also investing in these platforms that also, the way they do these things, create some extensibility into other data management tools, right? When we talk about, DLP, DSPM, et cetera, we're purely talking about data security capabilities. But if we look at, data governance as a whole, right? Thinking about lineage, master data management, all of these things that generally fall out of the purview of the security team. It's in my opinion, and in the strategy that we built at EnPro, it was to make sure that where we invest, it has extensibility into these other, master data management platforms, so that there's kind of a seamless integration there, and that we're not doing redundant work. We're not creating redundant, data classification labels and things like that. And I think that, when you can kind of create more of a collaborative environment with the technology that you're investing in, investigating and managing and measuring the effectiveness of your processes becomes a little bit easier. And it also helps to reduce risk, which ultimately, when we talk about DLP and DSPM, that's what we're really largely after, is to, effectively manage data security risks.
Lot of good stuff yet again from you, sir. I think what I heard, maybe summing it up a little bit, is a lot of what you've been doing and been successful at doing, it sounds like, is not looking at the problem right in front of your nose, looking at it more as a strategy. And I say it in that way because I've talked to a lot of folks that they come to me and say, "Hey, Ward, I've got this problem." And, I'll continue the DLP. I've got this DLP problem. Like, all right, what is the problem? Well, I have this thing. Maybe it's email. Cool. What do you have today? Right? What's currently in your ecosystem? Do you have something that can cover it? You don't? Okay, like, what is your email think about everything, don't think about that point solution. If you need one, okay, there's usage for point solutions for sure. Is that the best way? Not always, right? Get something that you can plug and play into your environment with everything else. Love where you went with that, the extensibility, right? Being able to extend it into your other controls to really make it a data ecosystem, right? Data ecosystem with data security in there. Like that, like that a lot.
A lot of times, I see, I talk to some peers, and sometimes it feels like um, they some people lack the full, vetting of all the use cases that they need to address. And so when we, when they start looking at different vendors, they're lacking all of the criteria that they need to address with the tool that they invest in. And I think sometimes that results in, point solution sprawl. We have this tool that does that, and we have this tool that does that. But if we spent a little bit more time on the front end, really planning and gathering requirements more effectively, and not only thinking about the problems of today, but also, I mean, these things are strategic investments, right? We're investing in solving a constantly evolving problem, right? Data management and the way organizations use and consume data is changing on a daily basis, just like all the technology around us. And so when we think about where we're investing from a tools and the technology perspective, I'm a firm believer in invest in the tools of today, but be thinking about how those tools will evolve and continue to grow with your business. And that's why, one of the best recommendations that I always make when I'm talking with security leaders that are engaging vendors is, as part of your evaluation of the product, like, do a roadmap session. Understand, do they have a vision that aligns with where you feel like your organization is heading? And do they even have a compelling vision that resonates with you? And I think oftentimes that may be something that goes, undervalued.
I know that's something that I always did when I was looking with vendors. I always enjoyed the roadmap session because it's great, to your point when you're looking to procure, like you certainly need the now, right? What's actually in the product, maybe what's very near future, right? In the next month or two. But I've always liked to say, okay, hey, where are you guys going in a year, right? 6 months to a year. What does your roadmap look like? Completely understanding that could change, and that's okay. But talk to me, right? What are you thinking? Are you being thought leaders, or are you just basically chasing maybe what competitors are doing essentially?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, it also, for me, it helps me to understand the art of the possible for that particular tool if I was to choose to invest in it, right? Knowing where the mindset of the the leadership within that vendor are heading helps me to kind of frame, how what type of extensible value that I might be able to achieve through, through expanding the use of a particular tool.
So we're talking a lot about roadmaps. This is kind of going to go, maybe out of left field here, but we're talking about a lot about like vendor roadmaps. Um, it occurs to me, right, within a security, well, within an organization, certainly within security, likely yourself as a CISO, you have your own security roadmap, which, not unlike a vendor roadmap, probably changes quite a bit based on business pressure, velocity, maybe M&A type of activities. How do you balance your own roadmap with, again, business velocity, but also, data security, making sure that making the correct choices today, hopefully, to set yourself up successfully for the future?
It's a great question. And, I think sometimes people have a tough time, like, building effective strategies. And to me, a roadmap is one component, one pillar of an effective strategy. And it's kind of the tactical, it's where the rubber meets the road, right? Is your roadmap. So, I think about, like, strategy as it pertains to the roadmap is sort of an upside down triangle, where your strategic vision, your North Star objectives kind of sit at the top. and then you kind of step down layers, right? Then you have your kind of program vision, and then you have maybe your organization's objectives, your program's annual objectives, and then you kind of break that down into the tactical roadmap or the tactical objectives that you're going to pursue over the next 12 months that help kind of directly map or align to those next level objectives. And so, by taking that, and that's the really oversimplified, model, but essentially by taking that approach, organizations can kind of take one objective that's, one roadmap objective and tie it and understand and track it all the way up to your organization's, strategic objectives. So, how maybe it's, deploying DLP, for example. Well, how deploying DLP agents for email, we'll even break it down even further, directly impacts some organizational strategic objective. And I think when teams understand how their tactical work impacts the greater good of the business, that's pretty powerful. So the way that we generally manage that is taking kind of a risk-based approach to kind of map out what our strategic objectives are for say a given year, right? Our higher level objectives generally don't change. But when we get to like maybe a lower level strategic objectives, those are largely risk driven. We do a lot of, baselining our organization just to kind of get some understanding of, how well are we doing for organizations of a similar size, of our industry vertical, et cetera. And then, we set out a plan for the year. To your point, I mean, things change all the time. It's kind of exciting, but it can also be challenging that I work for an organization that grows through M&A. And so, I mean, to your point, we are always one M&A away from something derailing our strategic plan, introducing a whole new, technology platform or something that, that we don't even support today. So, we know that that's part of our op tempo and just our, kind of our playbook. So we always are just honest with the fact that if things get, thrown upon us mid-season, we're well versed in pausing, taking a step back, taking a look at everything that's in front of us, and taking a prioritized approach based on, risk and business need, and kind of amending that together. And sometimes things have to come off the list or get delayed. But being responsible with how you prioritize is critically important. And then the most important thing is to make sure that every decision we make is business aligned. In this new day and age, we talk about the CISO, being a business leader, and I couldn't agree more. Like to be effective and to be more effective, we have to have the trust and the collaboration with all of the leaders of our business. So we don't make those types of reprioritization decisions in a vacuum. We have conversations and we understand the risk trade-offs, the value and benefit and capability trade-offs. And ultimately, we land where we land. But, it's always, it's never something that's just, fly by night decisions that are made. It's always involving the right people at the right levels and, hopefully collecting all of the relevant data to make good decisions for our business.
You said something there that was actually a big breath of fresh air to me. I've been in a few organizations that would do M&A, and they wouldn't take a pause, right? When something changed, it'd be like, okay, this thing's happening, this new thing's happening, but guess what? You're still sprinting. You're still sprinting here. And, where then often, 9 times out of 10 landed us, as you can imagine, is here's where you are. Here's what that new organization is. Now the gap's even bigger, right? Because you just kept sprinting instead of taking the pause here and saying, oh, shoot, we're in divergent paths. How do we bring this together to actually get us? So I think that is incredibly important for everybody listening. Like when you have those, not only M&As, but maybe bumps in the nights, changes of business strategy, realignment, whatever, like, be okay with taking a pause, not forever. Don't do analysis paralysis, but pause, reassess, make sure what you're doing actually makes sense.
Yeah, I say especially like in M&A scenarios, whenever we buy a company, I always say, when we make an acquisition, we buy all of the other company's bad habits and technical debt. And if you don't pause to understand how that environment is going to be successful and operate effectively with as an integrated component of your business, then you're really missing an opportunity to ensure alignment. But also, one of the biggest things that I try to avoid is negative impact to that acquired business, right? We acquire businesses not to spin them up and then divest them. We acquire strategically so that we can incorporate those capabilities into our portfolios. And so when I think about the importance of that, I have to be careful with the approaches that we take to integrate the business, to enable the business through technology, to protect it through technology, and if I didn't pause and really think about the impact of all of those elements, then I could really I could cripple their ability to manufacture and ship products, which impacts profitability. And ultimately, I don't exist. My program doesn't exist for the sake of security alone. Like, we are one element to enable the business to be successful. And if we impact that because of security, then we're doing a disservice, and we're no benefit to anybody.
And that's often a career limiting move when that sort of thing happens for sure. It's not good for growth or longevity of the role.
I was gonna say it's not good for growth unless the growth looks like updating your resume.
Yes, yes, which sometimes isn't the worst thing, right? Depending your situation. But speaking of longevity and whatnot, like you've been around the block for a bit, about 25 years plus in the industry. You're winning awards, right? You won a few CISO awards last year. What was your journey into kind of the CISO role and where you're at today?
That's a great question. And I think the security industry as a whole has really evolved during the time, during throughout my career. When I first got into technology, security was a thing, but there was no degree programs for a cybersecurity expert. There wasn't well carved out pillars of a security career, and so it's been a blessing to see such a focus and an evolution of this industry. My path. So I started out. I joined the U.S. Army as a young man, and I told my recruiter that I wanted to do something with computers. And like many recruiters, they tell, I won't say they lie, but they tell half truths. They get people to sign up and enlist, which worked for me. But the job that I signed up for initially was really focused on voice and data communications, and it was all like military standard equipment, so nothing really transferable to the civilian world. But I served for about 10 years. Throughout my tenure in the Army, the military wisened up and they started adopting more, COTS networking equipment. So I got some experience with some Cisco equipment and other commercially available networking devices, and decided I wanted to be a network engineer. So I went and got my CCNA and got my first job out of the Army, not as a network engineer, but as a systems guy. So I supported Active Directory, Exchange, a lot of the Microsoft enterprise stack, and sort of a generalist. But through that, I got a lot of experience on the infrastructure side of the house. Served in a couple help desk roles, which really helped me to understand, how businesses use technology, and maybe at a technical level, how a good environment should look like. And throughout my career, I went to work for a large hospitality company who had suffered a data breach a few months before I joined, and I had an opportunity to get my hands dirty with PCI compliance and thus, security. And, it just kind of evolved from there. I had the benefit of working for companies like Humana, who had, the most complex and just mature enterprise information security program I've ever seen. And I went to work for GE and had an opportunity to, build global teams and, support large enterprise divestitures. And it ultimately led, to my role as a CISO. But the advice that I would give somebody is, your path is your path. You can't you can't necessarily, change how you got to where you are. But if you want something bad enough, do enough research, talk to enough people, understand how you can make yourself more marketable for those roles, and understand, what skill sets are CISO or organizations looking to hire CISO looking for, and just figure out how to plug those gaps within yourself. And that would be, I think anybody can be a CISO. It's not an easy job and it's not easy to get, but with enough time and effort invested into yourself, I think it's achievable for anyone.
So first, very, very impressive, your journey there. I heard something really cool in there, though. There's a lot of folks out there, like myself once upon a time, that feel if you're super technical, right? Engineer, you were a systems administrator, networking, whatever, that CISO isn't going to be obtainable, right? That's not the path, because there seems to be, and it's not everybody thinking this, but there's a good amount of folks that think this. There's a lot of folks that think you must be in the GRC arena, right, to eventually get to CISO, because the CISO is just governance, risk, and compliance. It's nothing else. Um, Obviously, you had a different path. So, what would you say to folks that say that?
Yeah, I would say that, in my opinion, the CISO does require GRC knowledge, but it doesn't mean you had to have lived a GRC life your whole career. The CISO's responsibility is at the end of the day, we do lead a technical function, right? We are deploying technical controls and as well as administrative, but I think CISOs have to have a good balance of technical knowledge as well as understanding how to effectively manage risk. I even think, I encourage a lot of, senior security leaders to go pursue an MBA degree or go take some sort of a business course, because, in addition, GRC, technology, but also, especially more and more nowadays, you have to understand, what makes a business function. And then the last part of that is when we talk about, the effective management of risk, there's long been this, I guess, cliche that security leaders, the business folks don't understand, what we do. And I've come to believe that the reason for that is because we're not speaking in a language that they really understand, right? And so it's incumbent on one of the two people to learn how to talk effectively so that the other understands. Now, we can take a hard stance and say, business leaders, you need to understand technology so that what I say, it resonates with you. Or we can say, you know what, maybe it's incumbent upon us to go ahead and learn how to really translate these technical terms and these, risk related terms into something that resonates with average business leaders. And I think that's what I'm seeing start to happen here. So, so that was a long way to say, I started through a technical path, but I don't think there's one avenue. I think it's a blend of all of these things that make a super effective CISO. And I think even if you didn't come, like I didn't come through a traditional GRC career path, there's still ways to achieve those skills. You got to be a lifelong learner as a CISO. So that's one of the things. Go out and learn what it is to be a GRC expert. Talk to people, go take classes. I mean, really challenge yourself to, once again, plug those knowledge gaps that you have within your skill set. Because being a CISO means that you're kind of I won't say I won't say a jack of all trades, an expert of none, but I mean, kind of, you gotta know a lot about a lot.
Diversify, right? Diversify your skill sets. I love that, right? You can be an expert in one or multiple things, but you need to have some working knowledge in the other facets as well. So, very good tips. Well, Frank, if folks want to connect with you, what's the best way to do so?
Yeah, you can connect with me on LinkedIn is probably the best way, and or via email. I mean, feel free to reach out via email or LinkedIn.
Perfect. And we'll make sure that we tag your LinkedIn on the episode and we put it out there. Well, this has been great. Thank you for joining today. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Hey, thank you. Glad to be here, and thank you for the opportunity.
And big thank you to our audience. Really hoped you enjoyed today's episode and learned something. Please tell others in your network to follow and listen. This has been another exciting episode of Guardians of the Data. See you next time. That's a wrap on another episode of Guardians of the Data. Thanks for tuning in. For show notes and more, visit guardiansofthedata.show. Guardians of the Data is made possible by support from Centro. To see how we help organizations discover and classify all of their data accurately and automatically while quickly achieving petabyte scale data protection without the fuss, please visit centro.io. Catch you next time.